Welcome back to the Sherry Sylvester Show. We are here in the dead of summer, 90 days from the presidential election, and I wanted to talk to an old friend, Carrie Simmons, about how conservative women are likely to impact the outcome of the national election in November. Carrie has built a career working at the intersection of public policy and politics. She's the founder of Red State Women and served as the first real staffer to the Republican caucus in the Texas House. Now, there's a job. She's been around the Capitol for many years and has advocated on a wide range of issues. As we sit here today, the presidential polls are tied, and we're looking at a distinct possibility that the first woman may be elected president.
Well, just as she broke barriers to become the first woman of color to serve as vice president, the first woman to serve as vice president, the first woman of color to serve as vice president, she would bring those characteristics to the top of the ticket of a major party, one of the two major parties. So for a woman of color, and both a color and interesting background, so she is descended from both African, Black, a father, a Jamaican father, and then a South Asian, an Indian mother. And so that is an interesting combination in American history.
This has been called a boys versus girls election. And I saw in print the other day a quote from another old friend of mine, Democrat pollster Celinda Lake, legendary pollster, who has said Trump's strategy is to win more men than he loses women. I've taken a good look at the math, and I don't think that will work. There are many more women voters than men. Almost 10 million more women than men voted in 2020, and women have a higher turnout rate, a gender turnout gap that is increasing every year. This is not a political show. I'm not Karl Rove. Carrie's not Karl Rove.
I don't have a whiteboard.
This is a policy show. And in Texas, we've repeatedly seen that conservative policies are supported by women because they benefit women. I want to ask Carrie if she sees that eroding this election cycle, and if so, how it happened, and what can we do about it? Carrie, welcome to the Sherry Sylvester Show.
Thank you, Sherry. And before we get into it, I just wanted to thank you, Sherry, for being a mentor to conservative women in this space and showing women of our background and faith that you can have a position of leadership at a top elected official's office, at a top policy office. So I really want to thank you for being a trailblazer in this space, and folks like us or myself are following along. But back to your question, I do worry about the erosion in the space. I read a recent poll that, this is a national poll, not a poll in Texas, that 55% of Republican women polled felt like the party wasn't looking out for their best interests. And that's something I'm really worried about, because I don't believe that's the case, but I think we have to frame the message to ensure that they know it is the case. And I think, honestly, this is much more of a national problem than it is in Texas. I feel like in Texas, we're doing it right, and we're letting folks know, we're letting women voters know we're doing it right. But I do worry about the impacts on the national scene.
Yeah, it seems like, in terms of message, that the Democrats have gone from a threat to democracy. Remember, we had threat to democracy. We can't elect these people. It's a threat to democracy. To now, weird. Those Republicans are just weird. And we had our vice presidential candidate go on the record talking about childless cat ladies. And that is a quote that has stuck. As a woman myself who married in my late 40s and don't have any children, I'm wondering who the hell is he to say, to make a judgment. And I think that crosses kind of what the Democrats have done with us on the issue of freedom. That's how they turned the life vote. They didn't fight about the issue of life. They fought about the issue of freedom. But what's your thought about messages, conservative messages, and how best to deliver them?
Well, I think a lot of the messages that the other side is focusing on are distraction tactics, because what I really feel like is the core value that moves all women, and about 61% of Republican women, is pocketbook issues. So the grocery, going to the grocery store, paying the electric bill, paying your property taxes, all of those things have gone up dramatically, and they have not done anything to address those or talk about a plan to address those. And I feel like that's what women want to see. They want to see a plan for change as it relates to inflation. And I feel like that's still a top driving message to women voters. And it's one that the Democrats are maybe shifting away from or picking something else because the distraction technique works better than the message.
That's really true, and particularly in the last 2 or 3 days. I mean, if this is Bidenomics with Crash Kamala, we're really in trouble. I'm wondering, and I know, we work around campaigns, we work in the political conversation here in Texas, and I think sometimes I've got a couple of charts. I think sometimes that when male leaders are thinking about speaking to women, they think about them as a small segment. Mm-hmm. We've got this chart here of the swing voters. The swing states are all tied. 60% of the swing voters are women. So your strategy in those states should be targeting women. But yet I think we kind of break it down. The whole race now is as tied, as I said in the beginning. Trump is winning 54% of men and 45% of women, and it's the exact reverse for Kamala. And the problem for us with those percentages is, again, there are more women. And another thing happens when you segment this. I've got another chart here that shows in the demographic groups that every group, I mean, you think about, well, let's do outreach to black voters. 60% of those voters are women. Look, the majority of all of them. White college graduates, over half women. All the age groups, Asians, 55% women. So that piece, the fact that thinking about women, thinking about economic issues, thinking about education issues, thinking about every issue really needs to be in a voice that women can hear. How do you fix that? What's your advice?
I think one of the things as a woman voter that bothers me the most is when I think that someone is changing their message just to speak to me. I believe all issues are women's issues. Please, treat us equally when talking about these things, and don't placate to us on specific issues. I want to hear an across the board message that resonates with me. And one of the things I think we need to work on, and like I said, Texas is excelling on this, is representation of women in the party. And that's one thing that was a huge goal of ours, Carrie Simmons and I with Red State Women, was focusing on the amazing women we have here in Texas that are in leadership positions, that are doing important things, that look like these voters. You have some of the top positions in the Texas Senate are governed by females. You have Joan Huffman as chair of Senate Finance, probably the most powerful committee. Senator Lois Kolkhorst, head of Health and Human Services, addressing healthcare issues for women in Texas.
A third of all the funding.
Correct. So you have these women in power that are delivering on what they're asked to deliver, and those are the types of faces and the types of things I think national voters need to see. And so that's what I think we're doing great in Texas. We could improve upon nationally.
And when you spend a lot of time in the Capitol talking to women about issues, women leaders, women House members, women staffers, what kinds of questions, or are there questions different than what you hear from men?
As you go into each office, you never know what you're going to get. But I will say, the women legislators really like to get in the weeds. They want to know what impacts this has, not just directly on their district, but maybe the ripple effects and really every single detail to what's going into this policy and how it's going to affect constituents in their district. So I see a high attention to detail. I see a need for compromise. I feel like the women legislators really want to get things done. They want to get a solution, and I appreciate that. Not to say the male legislators do this too, but when I go into a female's office, I'm always prepared to get an additional set of questions, and I want to be prepared for them because they're prepared.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like, as conservative women, I don't want, as you say, I don't want to be pandered to. and I don't want to be pigeonholed. I mean, I guess the highest ranking woman elected in the state is Dawn Buckingham, who heads the General Land Office, which sounds like a very male role, but she's made it clear that it definitely isn't. So I think we don't want that, but we do want there to be a recognition that you may not be getting to all the people. I think let's think about the issues that are priorities for us, like the border. I think that issue is an issue for all Texans, certainly an issue for women. But there are ways that you can tell that story to make sure you're driving it home.
I think security in general is a really important issue to women. The border security, of course, but local security, whether it's supporting local law enforcement or ensuring that their kids are safe at school. Security across the board is something that's extremely important to us as protectors of our families. And that's something that I haven't seen a really clear message from on the other side. And I'm not sure we're delivering a perfect message on it either, but it is crucial to women, and I think it does drive their votes and the protection of their family.
Yeah, we should say that coming on is that in talking, maybe having a few critiques for the conservative side, we're always so blessed by our opponents, because it seems like no matter how badly we're doing, we're now running against a guy that wouldn't call in the National Guard to stop the riots from burning the capital city down.
Well, I feel like we have to make moves nationally that mirror what Texas has done in this space, and that's really taking action to secure the border and also protecting our local law enforcement.
There's a lot of voices in our party, and I wanted to get your take. I mean, one thing that I think that didn't work, and it went right to what you said, was Katie Britt's speech from the kitchen.
I watched it. I watched it live. I've seen millions of other clips she's done. I'm very impressed with her work. I think she's an impressive individual. But I was a little taken aback that she was in the kitchen. I'm a working woman. I also don't have any children, and I do cook dinner, but I don't spend a majority of my time at the kitchen table. I'm at the office, or I'm working, and so it didn't resonate with me for that location. And I think that there might have been other women who were maybe in the same spot, that I don't necessarily need to be in the kitchen all the time. I bring a lot more to the table than food preparation. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that placement of her in the kitchen really jarred the rest of the speech. I feel like there were some good elements to the speech, but the placement in the kitchen and the breathiness, it really was distracting from the message. And so I feel like, so oftentimes I'm sure there's a lot of input that goes into where those are filmed and how they're done, and lots of practice. And I feel like maybe they overworked that one.
Yeah.
They should have let it be natural. They should have let her speak from her heart. And I think that maybe she got overproduced.
Yeah, I think there's a yearning in our party sometimes because we see what the left has done, the woke culture, and what that has created, to long for the days of Leave It to Beaver. But I don't want Leave It to Beaver. I live there. I went to college when my choices were teacher or nurse.
Right.
I mean, I think we have to have a little bit broader vision of the future. And one of the women that inspires me, I'm going to ask you about several, is Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, wonderful. Just fantastic.
Just amazing.
I really feel like what she's done in her home state has been transformational. She's been, it's a challenge coming from where she comes from, and she overcomes it every time, right? She is not just the daughter of someone, she is in her own right, a leader. And I think she does such a great job leading on issues like education and childcare in her state, and being a really good face for the conservative females.
I think so too. And her colleague, our former CEO here, Brooke Rollins, one of the things that they talk about, I mean, Sarah Huckabee Sanders talks about being the first presidential spokesperson who was a mother. And I think that's a huge difference. And Brooke talks about that a lot too, the fact that she had young children and was working as the chief policy advisor in the White House, and how Trump accommodated that. So I know, and we, as you said, Lieutenant Governor Patrick's top lieutenants have been women since he has been the chair, that has been lieutenant governor. So we know that men think that way. Maybe it's just our marketing people.
Well, and I completely agree that there are, Texas women who are leading in this space. And one of the most beautiful moments I saw on opening day last session was Representative Ellen Troxclair had her 3 kids with her on the floor, and her son was asleep on her during swearing in. And that was like a true personification of a working mom who, has a day job, is an elected official, has her kids, taking care of her children. And really that should be a portrait of what we are as conservative women. We can do all of these things and be successful. And, it really makes it personal when you see a sweet photo like her son sleeping on her during swearing in. I was very moved by it.
And that image goes back to any issue that you want to cover. I mean, one of the reasons that the invasion at the border is so concerning for all of us is because it overruns the healthcare services and the schools down in the valley and all the way up.
Well, and the crime that follows it. I mean, that really gets back to the safety issue is when we have porous borders, there are concerning individuals that cross. Not everyone is coming here for a better life. Not everyone's coming here for the American dream. And those are the folks that I want to ensure that we're protecting, our families from, the children from. And that's, allowing those folks across the border and the drugs that could potentially follow is really a burden on the state and for families.
Mm-hmm. And I think for thinking women, it is the bottom line. I was in Milwaukee when Nikki Haley spoke to the convention. And it was interesting because conventions are always the base.
Oh, right.
They are always the base. That's who cares about going to conventions. Other people have real lives. Mm-hmm. But they were there. And Ambassador Haley gave a very solid, not effusive speech saying, this is why you have to vote for Trump. And I thought it was very, very convincing, and also showed how wide, how big the tent is for us. Others, but I'm not as always as charitable stretching the other way with, say, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
So there's a lot of different
there's a lot of ways to go.
There's a lot of different representation within the party, and I know that we both have differences with all of the different types of individuals in the conservative perspective, and there's a wide variation. But when it comes down to it, it's back to the basics. Mm-hmm. It's lower taxation, it's less regulation, and I think that's where really the party needs to go back to is the basics, and getting back to the issues that impact our everyday life, not all this other fluff that's out there, but the things that impact our bottom line.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's very important, and I think if we had Trump in the room or Susie Wiles or some of those people, I think we would say that it's important, having done it for as long as we've done it, which is both of us longer than Trump. You can't assume that Democrats are stupid. We do because their policies are so stupid, but politically they're pretty smart. And
I feel like the younger generation has experienced a lot of turmoil in their lifespan when it comes to national issues. Mm-hmm. Going through COVID, going through all of these other issues that really are life altering, right? They've lived through so much, and they're so young, and I feel like we haven't gotten back to a stable base. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like that's where we need to turn back to. And I saw a meme on probably Instagram, called Brat Summer, and Kamala was making some connection to Brat Summer, and I don't understand that. Maybe the younger generation does. I don't really know what that means, but I thought that was an interesting tactic to try to incentivize the youth vote to come a direction based on something that's cool or hip, and really I'm not sure it really means much.
Right.
And that's the part that unsettles me, is I wish we would get back to what matters.
What do you think in terms of the time having passed? It's on my resume. I did not work for Geraldine Farrar when she ran for vice president. I'm not that old, but I did work on one of her Senate campaigns. And if you remember, it was perceived that George H.W. Bush was disparaging to her after the debate. He thought he'd beaten her, and he said, I think I beat her. I'll not repeat what he actually said. But in going into the debate, Trump against Kamala, will she have that extra protection? She'll be able to attack him, and how should he approach his attacks to her? I'm sure a lot of people, I know they're waiting for what we think.
With bated breath. They're gonna take our recommendation and run with it. No, I really hope that she is treated as an equal, that she is treated as they would treat Joe Biden. It upsets me when, you need to take kid gloves with a female. I think we can handle it. I think we're strong enough. I think we've fought to be in the positions we're in, and we don't need special treatment. So I hope that is the way it goes. I'm sure it is not. And I know how aggressive they can both be as candidates. So it'll be interesting. And I just really hope that they look at it as equals.
I read an article this week, not really related to this, but it's that Gen Z, I learned in all my managing classes that when you need to criticize someone, you do it in a compliment sandwich.
Oh, yes.
So you say,
the sororities taught that.
Yeah, right. I really love that you're here and you're really putting your energy in it. Now you need to do this. And Gen Z hates that. They read right through it. They want you to just hit them head on. If you didn't like it, say you didn't like it. So
I think that is something that President Trump is very direct. So there's no arguing with that. And I think that goes back to the message of solutions, going in with a solution, saying what it is, and not getting caught up in the fluff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of all of these external, trying to think the best way to describe them, just distractions. Mm-hmm. Distractions that really are not to the core of what voters care about.
Right. If it's anything that Trump has taught us with the bio story that he brings and the baggage that he brings. I've been with Trump a long time. I was in New York, working in New York, around the mayor's office and other places when he was building his career. It's that what matters is what your policies are, what you're going to do. And that's what matters with him. And so we need to keep in mind that that's what matters with her. It's not about who she is.
And that's what I feel like we should all take a step back and just say, in the end, look at how this is going to impact you as a person, and think about that when you're voting.
Right.
Get past the personas, get past the extracurriculars. What are they going to do that's going to impact your life?
Well, let's look at, we were talking before we started, in Texas, Governor Abbott has broad support among women voters. Why do you think that is? One, he champions the border. Two, he's just put it on the line on school choice, but
I think he hits home on the issues that they care about, and he has a very supporting and loving wife who is always out there championing issues like human trafficking and other issues that the governor's focusing on. But the first lady is amazing, and he does a great job of giving her a platform to talk about the issues she cares about that resonate with women as well. But I think one of the issues that the governor's really focused on is education, and there's a lot of good things we have done and we're still yet to do. But I read a hobby poll that came out last week that said amongst women voters, 46% were dissatisfied with the quality of education their children were receiving at an ISD, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the governor is focusing on that for improvement, for student improvement, for student outcome improvement, achievement improvement. And those are the items that I think resonate with women at home, with family and children, and they want to see their kids succeed, and they want to see their kids graduate with job opportunities. And that's something that the governor also champions is economic development, making sure we have the training and the jobs for the workforce in Texas, and making sure it's a wonderful place to live and work.
Mm-hmm. And adding it up so it's real,
Mm-hmm.
that everyone has access rather than everyone has access to a diversity program. But make sure everyone actually has access to jobs.
Well, and reskilling. Look at all the efforts we've put into reskilling a workforce where there's a new field. We have the new CHIPS Coalition Commission, the Space Commission, all of these emerging technologies. We are focusing on retraining individuals so that they can work in these spaces. And that's something that I think is not just critical to women, but everyone.
Mm-hmm. And that's another change that Abbott and Patrick also have done in higher education and community colleges, is to begin to focus on outcomes. Because I think another concern that women have, women who are students, young women, and women who are mothers, is how much college costs and where you get for it. And something TPPF has done a lot of research on. So.
Well, and what's so important in that space is transparency, is understanding if you're going to college for a certain degree path, what does that look like for you when you leave? What is the expected median income? How many jobs are available in the state? Those factors are really important. And we've done a lot of work in Texas, and TPPF has done work in this space to provide that transparency through the Higher Ed Coordinating Board for parents and for students to make educated decisions about their future.
Well, now, you live in Austin, right?
I do. I'm in the, what do they call it, the Blueberry? I'm in the Blueberry.
You're in the Blueberry, you're here, and I live in Texas. I live in San Antonio. There's a bunch of things that we don't just, no one at the Capitol talks about right now. We're not going to talk about the leadership of the House or anything like that. But leaving that aside, what are you hearing in terms of the buzz on this election? Because if you live in Austin, you got like Democrats around you all the time, enthusiasm, people like the selection of Tim Walz from Minnesota, I don't know.
It is unique being in Austin because it's a different echo chamber than outside of the Blueberry. You have a lot of people who work in politics. It's a heavily Democratic area. And I think that the shift from President Biden to Harris has provided some new energy. I will definitely say that I think there's an invigoration with Democrats who maybe were tired of what had been there for a long time. We're looking for new lifeblood, and I feel like they receive that with Harris. I have not seen as much excitement about her VP selection, but I do think she's bringing new energy to this space where maybe people had become complacent or tired. The top of the ticket was looking pretty old. So I would say they're energized. And I do think, again, this has been a roller coaster of emotion for everyone, coming from the assassination attempt to the change to it's just a lot for people to take in before this election cycle. Yeah,
it's just been one of my favorite, Charles Krauthammer, said one time that the 90s were a vacation from history. And I feel like this last 2 months in politics has just been jam-packed with, think what that chapter is going to look like in the history book. And then the Democrats nominated somebody that wasn't even running. Never got a vote. So,
and that feeds back into the distrust of the democratic system. Are we following the rules that we put in place for everyone? Are we saying, this is who was nominated, and this is who the party selected, and this is going to be at the top of the ticket? I feel like we're changing the rules a little bit, and that creates distrust in our democracy, and that's something I worry about.
Yes, and I think that's another thing when you talked about women being in the weeds and wanting to know the details. These are details that matter. For people.
And for the future. You don't want this hopping around every single election cycle. You want to know, you want to have investment in these candidates and be hearing from them for months on what their priorities are and what their goals are. And I feel like we're kind of being jostled about.
Right, right. So if we were going to sit down with the national leadership or even the state leadership, although we agree the state leadership is doing better, we do have a gender gap in Texas, but it's not nearly as big as national. Where we started was don't pander.
Mm-hmm.
There are no women's issues.
All issues are women's issues.
All issues are women's issues. Just listen and focus.
And rebuild trust. I think from both parties, we need to rebuild trust with the base to do what we're going to say we're going to do.
Right.
I think there's been a lot of promises, and like I said, in Texas, we're championing these efforts, but on a national scale, they've got to have, I want to see a plan. I want to see a blueprint. I want to see what you're going to do when you come in,
mm-hmm.
not just promises or dances or TikToks. I want to see a plan.
Or memes, yeah. and it's what, yes, let us see your plan. Let us see your track record. Show us what you have done.
Yeah, what are you proud of?
What are you proud of? And what would you do differently?
Mm-hmm.
I think women want to hear that. Everybody wants to hear that.
Always room for improvement. Love to hear how they each seek to do that.
Right. I mean, one of the things we think of, you were talking about COVID, and I think COVID also brought a lot of women into the political conversation because they closed the schools.
Yeah, they were at home and they saw what their children were being taught on Zoom, and they were concerned. And for the first time, it's like they were in the classroom with their child, and they realized that there needed to be changes made,
right.
Whether it's on the standard of the curriculum, the way the curriculum was taught. I think it was eye-opening for a lot of parents.
And even stop with they were at home because they closed the schools.
That's right.
So it really changed the lives for a lot of primary caregivers, which end up being women.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, thank you for coming down the street and joining us today, and thank all of you for joining us on the Sherry Sylvester Show. You can subscribe to the Sherry Sylvester Show at Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on X at Sylvester1630. And if you'd like to receive the 9th in Congress newsletter, which I put out every week and which includes the weekly winners and losers, you can sign up at TPPF's website, www.texaspolicy.com/9th in Congress. See you next time.